First story: how my father's abuse stole my childhood, and how I found the strength to heal from my mother's silence and years of trauma. You never forget the moments that steal your childhood. For me, those moments weren't just fleeting. They were relentless. I'm 42 now, but the weight of my past feels like it follows me everywhere, shaping who I am and who I fought to become. It all started when I was 8 years old. I vividly remember the day I decided I couldn't take it anymore. My father's actions, the abuse, the pain, had become unbearable, and in my confusion and despair, I tried to end my life. That moment pushed me to speak up. I told my mom what he was doing, desperate for someone to save me. Her response still rings in my ears: "Don't worry, I'll talk to him." I wanted her to protect me, to hold me, to promise me that things would be okay. Instead, it felt like I was telling her about a broken toy or a spilled glass of milk. Nothing changed. No one brought it up again. Weeks passed, and I was left to endure the same nightmare. Then one day, without warning, my mom packed us up. Me, my siblings, and whatever belongings we could fit into the car. And we left. We moved across state lines to live with my grandmother. I thought maybe this was her way of saving us. But she never said a word about why we left. She never mentioned what I told her. Silence was her way of coping or ignoring. But the horror didn't end. My step-grandfather started to prey on me shortly after we arrived. By then, I had learned a harsh truth. Speaking up didn't make anything better. So I didn't fight back. I didn't tell anyone. I just endured it because, in a twisted way, I thought at least this time it wasn't as bad. There was no penetration, no physical agony. My sister and I would stay at his house overnight, and one of us had to sleep in his bed while the other slept on the couch. I fought tooth and nail to be the one in his bed. Not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't let her go through what I was going through. I put myself in that position every time, convinced it was the only way to protect her. By the time I turned 12, my mom decided I was the problem. I was labeled as out of control, the rebellious kid who couldn't follow the rules. She sent me to therapy, probably hoping the counselor would fix me. On my very first session, I broke down. It was like I couldn't hold it in any longer. I spilled everything. What my father did, what his brothers did, what my step-grandfather was doing. The counselor called my mom into the room, and I'll never forget her reaction. She acted shocked, like it was the first time hearing this. She still claims she doesn't remember me telling her when I was 8. She says her mind must have blocked it out because it was too traumatic for her. But I know better. She heard me back then. She just didn't care enough to act. Eventually, the truth caught up with everyone. My father was charged. One of his brothers took his own life, and the other escaped any consequences. My step-grandfather's crimes were exposed, and it turned out I wasn't his only victim. Many of my cousins suffered the same fate. He went to prison for a long time, but my father, he got 2 years. 2 years for destroying my childhood. When my father was released, he moved in with his mother. My uncle, who also had children, was living there too. You can probably guess what happened. He was accused again. This time, he ran to my mom for help, and unbelievably, she helped him. She let him stay at our house overnight, even though there was a lifetime no-contact order between him and me. The next day, she and my stepdad drove him to the Greyhound station to escape. He was eventually caught and sentenced to 15 years. Now he's out again, and somehow, I've been trying to rebuild a relationship with him. I don't know why. Maybe it's because part of me has always wanted a father. For years, I doubted myself. I convinced myself I was crazy, that I had imagined the abuse. But then, while sitting in jail later in life, I received a letter from my father. His words left me stunned. "I raped you from the ages of 3 to 8. I did this because you were the oldest and I thought you could handle it. You are the way you are because that is how I trained you to be." Reading those words broke something inside me, but it also freed me. For so long, I had believed the problem was me, that I was making it all up, exaggerating. That letter, as horrifying as it was, validated my experiences. But knowing the truth didn't fix me. I let my trauma take control of my life. I turned to drugs to numb the pain, ended up in abusive relationships because I didn't believe I deserved better, and even went to prison a few times. I tried to end my life, more times than I can count. When I became a mom at 15, I was terrified of myself. I avoided changing my baby's diapers or giving her baths because I was scared I'd become the monster my father was. I was terrified the cycle would repeat. For years, I let the scared little girl inside me dictate my life. That broken child, desperate for love and safety, made all my decisions. But at some point, I realized I couldn't let her control me anymore. If I didn't let her go, she would drown me completely. Now I'm a work in progress. I refuse to live as a victim anymore. I'm learning to forgive, not because they deserve it, but because I deserve peace. I'm trying to understand that love and sex aren't the same thing. I'm starting to love myself, even if it's still a struggle. Sharing this isn't easy, but I hope it helps someone. If you're reading this and you've been through something similar, I want you to know you're not alone. There's a way forward, even if it feels impossible right now. Thank you for listening. Second story. Pregnant for the 5th time after my husband's irresponsible actions left me stuck in a cycle of abortions, emotional abuse, and financial control. I never imagined I'd be standing at the crossroads of a situation this complicated, yet here I am, with nowhere to turn. I'm 32, a wife and mother of 2 young kids, and right now I'm facing a dilemma that seems impossible to solve. A few days ago, I found out I'm pregnant again, and while some might think this should be a joyous occasion, for me, it's more of a nightmare. I've had multiple abortions in the past few years, and this will be the 5th. Before you judge me, let me explain. This isn't a decision I've taken lightly. I never wanted to be in this position, but it's become unavoidable. My husband and I have had so many arguments about our situation, and every time I feel like I'm reaching a breaking point, things somehow manage to get worse. It's the constant pressure, the emotional toll, and the physical strain that's breaking me down. And the fact that my husband doesn't seem to get it is only making things harder. To give you some background, I've had 4 abortions in the last 4 years, after giving birth to twins. Yes, 4. And every single one of those procedures has left me feeling drained, not just physically, but emotionally as well. It's taken a toll on my health and my mental state, but the kicker is my husband's complete indifference. And it's not like we didn't talk about it. I've told him over and over again that we need to be careful if we don't want another pregnancy, but it's like he's deaf to my words. The issue is simple, yet so frustrating. He refuses to use condoms. And by refuse, I mean that he only uses them when I hand him one and practically beg him to. Otherwise, he just does his thing and acts as though it's no big deal. The problem? I can't take birth control pills. I've tried every brand under the sun, even a contraceptive ring, but nothing works for me. My doctor told me, point blank, that hormonal contraception is out of the question for me. We need to rely on condoms, but my husband refuses to take responsibility for this. It's like he believes I can just magically control the situation. Sex has become a major source of anxiety for me. Every time we have sex, I'm terrified of getting pregnant again. And I've tried everything. I've tried timing things so that we don't have sex when I'm ovulating, but he doesn't care. He'll push me, saying he's in the mood, even when I'm not, or when I haven't even showered, something that's really important to me. Most of the time, I just lie there, feeling like a lifeless body as he goes through the motions. And when I try to address our intimacy, it's always the same response. We're too old to try anything new. Sex is basic after 30. But it didn't stop there. It got worse. One of the most painful moments came after my last abortion, when I discovered that my husband had cheated on me. I found out in the worst way possible. He had to get tested for STIs after our doctor advised abstinence for a month following my procedure. And sure enough, his test results came back positive. He wasn't even sorry. In fact, he showed me the results with complete confidence, almost as if he was proud of what he'd done. But despite all this, he still won't buy condoms. I've asked him repeatedly, begged him, but he refuses. It's shameful to him, apparently. Instead, I'm expected to go to the pharmacy and pick them up myself, with our 2 kids in tow. And it's not like I can just slip in and out of the store. The pharmacies here are tiny, cramped places where everyone can hear your conversation. You can't even grab items off the shelf yourself. You have to ask the counter for them, and that fills me with so much anxiety. But I go anyway, because I know I have no choice. The problem is that my anxiety is so overwhelming at times that I freeze. I can't even take the simple steps to care for myself. But here's where it really hits home. I don't even have the money to buy them on my own. My husband controls all the finances. He's the one who decides what we can and can't afford, and he accuses me of overspending on things like groceries or necessities. If I were to buy condoms, he would consider it an irresponsible expense, and I'd have to hear about it for days. So a few days ago, I finally told him the truth. I was pregnant again, and I couldn't go through with it. This was the 5th time I'd been put in this position, and I couldn't do it anymore. I told him how his careless behavior had affected my health and my sanity. I told him how his refusal to take responsibility for contraception had led to this, and how it made me feel abandoned and uncared for. And do you know what he said? He didn't apologize. He didn't show any remorse. Instead, he just lay there asking, "So what are we going to do?" as if the decision wasn't already clear. Then he went on to say that my abortions were good news. Yes, you heard that right. Good news, as if this was some sort of blessing, rather than the emotional and physical toll it's taking on me. And then, of course, he turned the blame on me. Aren't you supposed to be on the pill? He asked. I lost it. I screamed at him, asking why he couldn't just buy condoms to prevent all this. But today's fight was the worst of all. He came home from the gym and asked, "Have you seen your period yet?" I was beyond shocked. What period? I'm pregnant. I couldn't believe it. And then he had the audacity to tell me that the pregnancy was my fault because I didn't take immediate action after we had sex. He actually suggested using lemons or herbs to end the pregnancy, like it was some medieval remedy. At that point, I couldn't take it anymore. How could someone be so ignorant about something so basic? How could he be so clueless about biology after all these years? I called him stupid. Honestly, I don't think it was an insult. It was a fact. This is a man who thinks butter comes out of cows as is, believes mayonnaise is just fancy cream, and once blamed me for a burn our child got when he flushed the toilet while I was giving our son a bath. I could go on and on about the ridiculous things he's said and done over the years, but it's exhausting. And I'm tired. I'm tired of feeling trapped, of feeling like I have no control over my life. I know I've made mistakes, I know I've been irresponsible in some ways, but the reality is, I feel stuck. I have no support, no money of my own, no way to make any changes. I'm just here in this cycle, and I don't know how to break free. So, I'm sharing this because I have no one else to talk to. I feel like I'm losing my mind, and I don't know how much longer I can keep going like this. I just need someone to understand, to know that this isn't as simple as it might seem from the outside. Third story. I was yelled at and disrespected by my dad's friends right before my wedding and decided to uninvite them, but my dad chose to stay friends with them. Was I wrong? It was the week leading up to the most important day of my life, my wedding day, and everything seemed to be going perfectly. The excitement was building, but then, out of nowhere, I got a call from one of my dad's friends that completely shattered the calm. I couldn't believe what was happening. A little background. My dad's friends are event coordinators, and when it came time to arrange the rehearsal dinner, my dad asked them for help. It seemed like a reasonable request at the time. I was busy with a million other things, so I was happy to let them take the reins for the dinner, trusting them to handle the logistics. The rehearsal dinner was going to be held at the venue where I worked, so I arranged for one of my coworkers to meet them there. They were going to show them around, answer any questions they had, and make sure everything was set up. It should have been a straightforward process, and I didn't think I needed to be there. But a couple of days before the rehearsal, I got a call from one of them. The moment I answered, I was taken aback by the anger in their voice. "Do you know how disrespectful this is? You couldn't even show up for people who are helping you. You didn't even invite us to your wedding." I was so stunned that I honestly thought he was joking. I started laughing, asking, "Wait, what?" But he didn't stop. He kept yelling, throwing insult after insult at me, saying things that cut deep. The words were coming so fast I barely had a chance to process them. I felt my heart pounding in my chest, my hands shaking. I had no idea what triggered this rage, and the more he ranted, the more I felt like I was spiraling. I tried to get a word in, but he just wouldn't stop. I was fighting tears, my mind racing, trying to understand what was happening. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "That's enough," I said, my voice trembling. "You don't get to talk to me like this." And I hung up. The moment the call ended, the floodgates opened. I lost it. I was shaking uncontrollably, tears pouring down my face, and I couldn't hold it together. My husband rushed over to me, wrapping his arms around me, trying to calm me down, but all I could do was cry. My brain couldn't process what had just happened. I immediately called my stepmom, trying to explain what had just gone down. But of course, they had already called her too. They didn't just yell at me, they had yelled at her as well. I was beyond upset now, feeling completely blindsided by how things had escalated. I told her, "They are not allowed anywhere near my rehearsal dinner or the wedding. I don't ever want to speak to them again." She was on my side, 100%. My dad wasn't aware of the full extent of what had happened yet, but as soon as he found out, he called them. He demanded that they apologize to me immediately. In response, I got a text from them, a half-hearted apology, but it wasn't much of an apology at all. It felt more like they were trying to justify their actions, like they were blaming me for the whole thing. Apparently, they thought I would be there at the venue that day, and when I didn't show up, they were angry that I stood them up. I never told them I would be there, though. I made arrangements with my coworker to meet them, to make sure they had everything they needed. He had shown them around, answered their questions, and gone above and beyond, so it was baffling to me that they would react this way. My dad and stepmom, while they agreed that their behavior was unacceptable, decided that they would still maintain their friendship with these people. That was tough for me to hear. It stung. I knew my dad wanted to keep the peace, but it felt like I was the one being left out in the cold. I had every right to uninvite them, right? After all, they had yelled at me in the most hurtful way possible, a week before my wedding, a day that should have been full of joy and excitement. But my dad and stepmom's decision to still be friends with them made me question if I had done the right thing. So I'm left wondering, am I the one in the wrong here? Did I overreact, or was I justified in cutting them out of my special day?